Good evening, everyone. We call to order the Moorhead City Council meeting. Today's date, October 28th, 2019. It is approximately 5:31 p.m. Madam Clerk, may we get a roll call, please?
Shelley Dahlquist. Here. Sarah Watson-Curry. Here. Shelley Carlson. Here. Heidi Durand. Here. Deb White. Here. Chuck Hendrickson. And Mayor Jonathan Judd.
Here. May we please rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance? Excuse me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And I'll read, the Moorhead City Council welcomes and encourages public input on issues listed on the agenda or of general community interest, time and council permitting. Speakers are limited to 3-minute presentations. Advertised public hearings are scheduled so that the public is afforded an opportunity to speak. Public hearings are generally scheduled 15 to 30 minutes after the start of the meeting. However, starting time may vary depending on other scheduled agenda items. Citizens wishing to address the mayor and council regarding a specific agenda item other than public hearings will be afforded an opportunity during the discussion of that item. Citizens wishing to speak on matters not listed on the agenda will be afforded the opportunity to do so under the heading Citizens Addressing the Council, usually scheduled at the beginning and the end of the agenda. Each person requesting the opportunity to speak is asked to fill out a request to speak form, which are the golden forms that are outside in the lobby entryway right at the front desk. So now, for those at home, we're on item number 3 of the agenda regarding agenda amendments. Are there any amendments to tonight's agenda?
Do not believe so, Mr. Mayor.
Then we'll move to item number 4, which is the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone wanted to take off consent for this evening's meeting? Okay.
Move approval.
Motion to approve the consent agenda made by Councilmember Durand, seconded by Councilmember Carlson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We move to number 5, recognitions and presentations. 5A, the presentation of police officers who have successfully completed the City Moorhead Police Department Field Training Program, presented by Chief Shedden Monroe.
Honorable Mayor and Council, City Manager, thank you. I appreciate your time and interest here and getting to meet our new employees. I know you have a full agenda, so I'll try and be brief. I'm very proud to introduce you to these officers. These were a very good hiring class for us. They've already made a pretty significant impact on the street already, as all of them seem to come in here with some pretty good community policing skills. Last May, we were at full staff. You remember, I kind of celebrated that. As we sit here today, we have 3 openings to fill. I have 5 new ones that are currently in training. 2 are out with injuries and 2 are out on FMLA, so we're working pretty short-handed yet right now. So we're really happy to have these 3 officers out hitting the street, completed with the field training program. So right now we're working on, of course, getting ready to try and get another hiring in so we can come into next summer, hopefully where I can celebrate being at full staff again. Just before I introduce these officers, I think I have to point out, though, the difficult and critical work our training staff has put in. As you know, over the past couple years, they've been training pretty much nonstop and have done really an incredible job, and they turn out some very good officers for solo patrol. So they're very, very good at what they do, and we're fortunate to have officers that put in that amount of time to help train up new officers and have them ready to go and be safe and do a good job out there. So I really want to thank them for what they do. So with introductions, the first officer here is Mackenzie, but he goes by Mac Schultz. Mac is a Moorhead native. He earned his associate degree in law enforcement from Alexandria Community and Technical College. He worked for the Jamestown, North Dakota Police Department for the past 3 years and brings that experience to Moorhead PD. On a personal side, he enjoys watching and playing sports in his free time, and Mac's the first generational officer out of his family. So please welcome Mac Schultz. I'm gonna step aside. Next we have Kyler Johnson. Kyler is a Harwood, North Dakota native. He earned his associate's degree in criminal justice from M-State here in Moorhead. And he also worked for the Jamestown, North Dakota Police Department for the past 3.5 years. So he's also adding his experience to our patrol division by working here. On a personal side, he enjoys working out and being outdoors and spending time with family. So please welcome Kyler Johnson. Lastly, we have Nick Bjorndal. Nick is a Hawley, Minnesota native. He earned his bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Concordia St. Paul. Nick previously worked for the city of Moorhead for the previous 6 years in our sanitation department before switching over to the Moorhead Police Department. On a personal side, he enjoys bird hunting, fishing, and training his dog. So he's also a certified scuba diver. So very happy to have these 3 officers here. And like I said, they came here with either Moorhead experience through working through another department or through Jamestown's police department, and we're very happy to have them here. So please welcome these officers. Any questions or anything for me? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you and congratulations. Okay, folks, item number 6 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from October 14th, 2019.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve by Councilmember White, seconded by Councilmember Dahlquist. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 7, citizens to address the council. Are there any citizens that wish to be heard on any matters that are not on the agenda? Seeing none, that moves us to item number 9, which is a public hearing to consider the 2019 Enterprise Zone Program. Is there a motion to move into public? I'm sorry. No.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's not quite
Oh, it's not 5:45. We're ahead again.
Wow. Rolling.
Okay. Then we will move on. Thank you for that catch.
Engineering.
MetroCog.
That's going to be a long one.
Mayor, we can move to number 10. That would be,
Okay, is 10 okay? Okay. So we'll move to the item number 10, folks at home, from the Engineering Department, a presentation on Metro Grow 2045 by Michael Maddox, FM Metro Cog. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. My name is Michael Maddox. I'll address that. I'm a senior transportation planner with the Fargo-Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Governments, which is the MPO for the Fargo-Moorhead region. I'll try to keep a brief presentation today. We'll run through some of the elements of the plan. We started our planning effort in 2018 to update the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or what was previously called the Long Range Transportation Plan, which is MetroCog's core document that is mandated by the federal government to be updated every 5 years. And it sets forth a number of policies and projects in the transportation realm through multiple modes of transportation, whether it be freight, auto transportation, transit, or bicycle and pedestrian types of transportation. So I'll just get started here if I can figure out the clicker. So as I said, we've been going through this process for about 18 months now. And really, the process has been existing conditions gathering. Our consultant, HDR, has had a number outreach with with the local jurisdictions, with the City of Moorhead staff, both the planning department and the engineering department, in gathering some of the information and the needs of your individual jurisdiction. We kind of went through a policy setting process, which went into some of our modeling efforts. We contract with ATAC, the Advanced Transportation Analysis Center, through Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute at NDSU, to do some future transportation modeling for the Fargo-Moorhead region, which goes into identifying future roadway needs. And then we do a very robust fiscal analysis of federal funds that this area is likely to receive in the next 20 to 25 years. And then we fiscally constrain all of our projects based upon that anticipated level of funding. However, we did talk to your individual engineering departments and planning departments on what local funds could also be brought to bear in some transportation projects. So if there are particular projects that you don't necessarily see, maybe they're being funded by either state or local entities, and not just through federal dollars. And so some of the goals and priorities of our plan that we've integrated, looking at system security and travel efficiency and reliability, walking and biking, access to transit, maintaining our infrastructure, that's very important, especially if a federal directive. Looking at environmental sustainability, economic development. We know that transportation has a huge economic development, whether it be freight getting around or getting people access to goods and services. And then looking at some of those emerging trends, we know that transportation technology is changing very rapidly, and we just integrated some discussions on that within our plan. And so, as it applies to roadway, these are just some of the policies that we've integrated into the plan. I will call out a subheading here when we look at under the first roadway congestion policies. One of the main emphasis of this plan is balancing livability with mobility. And that really means looking at how we develop infrastructure in our community, what those cross-section of those roadways are, and what really are the intended users. So looking at mobility corridors, but also looking at kind of what we call livable corridors, neighborhood facilities that maybe access capacity wouldn't be right for. And so it's really balancing all modes of transportation and looking at how transportation in our area impacts all the other things, whether it be housing or jobs or all of those things. Moving on, we have a number of bicycle and pedestrian goals. One in particular that I'd like to call out is developing a trail network that is separate from what we call side paths. And those are the ones that run next to roadways. And we're really looking at how bicycle and pedestrian transportation can be competitive with automobile traffic. And it's not necessarily going to be one for one, but looking at how we can maybe incentivize transportation choices using these other modes, and that's one way we could do it. And then getting into transit, we didn't hit transit too heavily in this plan. We did list a lot of their priorities that they're working through currently. Transit does its own 5-year plan that's mandated by Federal Transit Administration, so we don't want to step on their toes. We are updating that document in 2020, and so we are integrating transit into this discussion, but knowing that they are going to go in their planning effort here starting in 2020. And feel free to ask any questions as we go along in the presentation. So we have a number of other goals that kind of don't necessarily relate directly to transportation, but are linked to transportation. Mixing land uses, integrating technology, like I said, and you'll see that balancing livability with mobility a number of times throughout this presentation. Ensuring that the transportation system is efficient, so when we're making investments, we're not putting undue burden on taxpayers to pay for that infrastructure, making sure that the dollars that we're spending are efficient as possible. So we'll get to just some of the existing conditions in our area. One of the things that we looked at very highly is safety on our transportation network. This map here is a listing of the 20 highest crash locations in our area, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're unsafe intersections. It's just areas where traffic incidents tend to be higher. You can see there's a high correlation to commercial corridors, heavily signalized corridors where there are probably a lot of access, a lot of turning movements, and therefore a lot of people they hit each other. Most crashes in our area are property damage only crashes, the vast majority. But we do also track highly fatalities and serious injury crashes as they go towards our performance measure target that I might get into here a little later. So we're looking also at pavement conditions, and pavement conditions in our area are very good. One thing that I've been noting as we go through all the communities in our area is that in Minnesota, the interstate network is 100% in good condition, and that's pretty rare to see in a lot of areas. We want to make sure that we're maintaining that, but we are meeting, exceeding all of our pavement condition targets in these areas, both in system miles in good condition and system miles below a poor threshold as well, and that's for both interstate and non-interstate highway system. Oh, that's just a larger map. And so along with that, we're looking at bridge conditions because those are very critical on the transportation network. There is only one area where we have a substandard bridge, and that's in West Fargo. It's on the state system. It's the interchange with US 10 with I-94, the flyover bridge there. It's just in a little bit substandard condition. The DOT has been tracking that bridge, and they're going to put some replacement money or some rehabilitation money into the bridge in the upcoming years. So that's on everybody's radar. It's the only red bridge you can see on the entire map. So we'll take it. That's a very good system condition. So now we'll get into kind of our level of service needs. As I mentioned before, we work with ATAC to do some transportation modeling that looks at how automobiles are using our transportation network and where congestion is occurring. And you can see from this map, the base year of our plan is 2015, which means all of our data collection efforts revolve around that 2015 year. And a good indicator of this is the congestion that's seen in the Cheyenne Street corridor in West Fargo. That project was programmed in actually 2015, but is actually being constructed now. I believe they're opening the roadway in the next couple of days, which is great to hear. But that project was specifically called out in our 2040 long-range transportation plan as being the highest priority in this region. For instance, that interchange there, traffic was backing up at PM peak times during on the interstate during that peak hour. And so that creates a very unsafe situation when you have high-speed traffic and then people that are waiting to get off at that interchange. So that was our number one priority. We've accomplished that priority. There are a number of priorities that we've accomplished for the last plan. We should be very proud of ourselves as a region, is when we set priorities, we really go after them. Just to name a few, in the last plan, the DDI on 8th Street in Moorhead was one of the higher priorities of the last plan. So was this interchange, the 52nd Avenue corridor, which is also going to open in the next couple of days. And so we've been very successful in moving transportation projects through our system and really getting results. And so we're looking for this 2045 plan to kind of do the same thing and hit the ground running. But we know that the investment is going to come in different things, like I said, creating efficiency in our system rather than maybe widening. So as we run the model to predict traffic in future years, the end horizon year of our plan is 2045. If no improvements were done to the system, this is how the level of service would be on the transportation network. However, it's a little bit of a misnomer. A lot of the roadway network connections in the southwest region where growth is occurring are not there yet. So it's showing all the roads around it as really poor level of service, even though those roads on a most part don't exist. For instance, like 76th Avenue is a gravel roadway. The frontage road along I-29 is a gravel roadway. We know as development occurs, roads will go in to be able to handle that traffic. And so this is just, if nothing were to occur, this is the level of service that will be. I'll also call out the main Avenue project, which half of it is open in Fargo now. You can see big red line running through there. That was a policy level decision to allow congestion to occur because of other policy level decisions, that livability versus mobility. And we're currently undergoing a US 1075 corridor study in Moorhead because MnDOT is going to replace the pavements on the US 1075 corridor in about the 2025 to 2027 time period. And so we're really clamping an eyeball on how the US 10 corridor is going to function once it is open, and maybe that is something that can be applied to the US 10 portion in the downtown in Moorhead. We're coming up with an alternative, at least, of study through that project. Kind of interesting. So some of our future needs. From this modeling effort, we've predicted a number of things that will occur given the socioeconomic, the job and household data that was developed for this plan. We see the number of trips going up by about 39%. The vehicle miles traveled in our area going up about 65%, and that's just due to where people are living versus where people are working. A lot of people are going to live in more outlying areas where jobs will be concentrated in some of the traditional job centers within our area. Vehicle hours traveled will also increase. The average trip length will increase by about 18%. However, if you look at that last bullet, average speeds will only decrease somewhere between 1% and 3%. And so we see that means that there's a lot of capacity in our system. Speeds will be able to be maintained on a lot of our corridors, and congestion will likely occur to the degree that it's occurring right now. And that's why I say we're balancing that livability with mobility. We've added a lot of capacity to certain corridors in our system, and over the next 20, 25 years, we'll be reaping the benefit of that. So the predictions that come out of the model give us approximate volumes in the future, and I would just like to call this slide actually just calls out a couple of those key volume areas. For one, on the I-94 at Red River Bridge, the model is predicting somewhere around 100,000 cars a day in the future. In talking with North Dakota DOT, Fargo District, this summer they actually saw ADT volumes on the bridge in somewhere between the 80 and 85,000 mark. And so we don't think that this is too far off. And with our consultant has said that with the current configuration out there that it will be able to handle this amount of traffic with a fairly decent level of service. So still above the thresholds that we look at. So, and then just in some of the other areas, we a lot of times focus on how our local network interacts with the interstate system. And so I mentioned before that we do a very robust fiscal analysis to predict the federal funding that will come to this area. These are some of the financial assumptions that we make. I'd like to call out one thing that's a nuance to this plan. In 2020, the decennial census is going to occur, and through that process, we could be named the next tier of MPO, which is a transportation management area. And in current federal legislation, that threshold is at 200,000 regional population. We know through the 2018 populations estimate program that we are around 212,000 as a region. However, I will say that over the past 10 years, legislators have been looking at raising that. We don't see any fear probably of that. That would cause a lot of other areas like us to go under thresholds if it was raised to a significant degree. And so with current legislation right now, we will be a TMA, which means that we will get a direct allocation of federal surface transportation block grant funding. It basically means that we no longer have to go through the states for our money. It will be directed at us from the federal level. However, it still needs to go through formula. On the North Dakota side, we predict about $12.5 million funds a year, but you can see on the Minnesota side, only about $1 million a year in federal funding. And that's basically a function because there are a lot more MPOs in the state, and the proportion of Moorhead and Dillware's population compared to those other urban areas in the state is a lot less than the Fargo and West Fargo's proportion to the urban areas in North Dakota. However, good news is that the state of Minnesota funds transportation projects a lot differently than North Dakota. There's a lot of bond funds, as you know. There's a lot of sharing of costs on certain roadway facilities. And so it's not all doom and gloom on the Minnesota side. This is just,
Clarification.
sure.
There's never any gloom and doom on the Minnesota.
No, there's never. The sun always shines in Moorhead. This is just a long-term prediction of federal funding coming into our area. Given those assumptions that we made on the previous slide, over the 20 to 25-year life of this plan, about $31 million in federal funding coming into the Minnesota portion of our urban area, and around 361 on the North Dakota side. And those are inflated values. One thing that we have keyed in on through this plan is that the interstate system in our urban area, both on the Minnesota and the North Dakota side, will need to be reconstructed during this 20 to 25-year period. MetroCog does not have control over interstate maintenance or national highway funds. The states are in control of those funds. They do the fiscal constraint for those funds, and we're just calling on this slide that we know those projects are going to occur. Those are very, very high dollar projects. The federal government funds those specific programs through the states because they're high dollar programs, and we're just saying, hey, DOT, we've cooperated with you in this funding analysis. You've let us know that this is your plan, we're incorporating it, but it doesn't affect our fiscal constraint. This is a listing of all of the roadway projects that in our area that are incorporated into this plan that could be fiscally constrained. So you can see, there we go. In Moorhead, there are a number of projects, and these are basically maintenance projects because of that low annual $1 million receipt in federal funds. This is not to say that there aren't other funds, local and state, that will come into the area to pay for other things. But this is what we can fiscally constrain in our plan. Another thing to also point out is I mentioned that US 1075 reconstruction, and that is shown here in that blue color, that brighter blue color. We know that the state is going to come in and do that. They're working through the bonding for that project right now, and they'll know in the next year or two when specifically they will come in and do that project.
Councilmember Duran has a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for bringing that up, because I did have a question and a comment. On the slides that showed the intersections with the most incidents, I see that Moorhead only has one, which is very good. So I want to say hats off to our engineers. But will the Highway 75 project, will that project, will that make it safer, that intersection of 8th and Main, or what are we doing? Bob, maybe that's a question for you, I don't know.
Yeah, we are looking at a number of treatments that will make things more predictable.
Okay.
One area in particular that we're looking at is the where US 10 and 75 come together kind of in our western area, and how that could be redone to make the traffic entering from north from US 75 more predictable to the mainline traffic on US 10.
Okay, so the intersection, it said 8th and Main. That was the intersection that had,
And that's, by the Dairy Queen there.
and you're talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the other intersection.
That was
by-
just one example of areas, but we're also looking at travel on 8th and Main. As you know, with the 11th Street grade separation, I shouldn't call it 11th Street, but that's one of the possible alternatives. But the grade separation project, they're looking at realigning US 10 and 75 right there.
Okay,
And likely a lot of those conflicts will decrease with the right turn movement there. But they are looking at a number of treatments in that area to negate those.
okay.
I think right now what's kind of occurring is that people don't necessarily know when a train is coming. And so all of a sudden they get up to make a decision, and then the crossbucks go down and they decide that they're going to get in the left turn lane. And so people are cutting across multiple lanes of traffic, and it creates incidents.
Okay.
And so we think that if there was an option where you never have to come in contact with the train or
We're
wait
going-
for a train.
No way, no
that-
way. In Moorhead?
that people, well, if the grade separation goes in and people have a reliable way to
Yeah.
traverse the tracks when there's a train there. And so that'll make that, they'll be able to make those decisions a lot further in advance.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Does that bring about any other questions or comments? Okay.
Sure. So as you can see, these are the projects that were listed there in the short term. They're preservation and corridor management projects. One thing that I will bring up is that when we looked at making efficiency in our transportation network is looking at signals and how signals operate and how signals talk to one another. So you can have larger corridor management. That was one of the highest recommendations of our plan. However, our engineer said, we're going to pay for that locally and not use federal funds just because of the hassle of going through the federal process to do projects like that. And currently, MetroCog is working with ATAC and looking at a signal or a ATSPM, I know federal acronyms, which is basically a signal performance measure to look at how they're operating, how they're communicating with one another. And so hopefully the results from that study can be used region-wide. So here are some near-term projects. I'll try to spend a little bit less time. We really set up the document to look at those near-term projects because we know that we do this project every 5 years, and so those first 5 years of projects are really the most important in this plan. As we get to the farther out, you can do some jostling, but in the next 5 years, that's when we're really looking for funding. And so this near term is kind of the middle term of our project. A number of preservation projects there in Moorhead, and these are kind of some of the far midterm projects, so out towards the end. We also incorporated what we're calling a vision plan, which is all those projects that are not fiscally constrained. So all those things that you would like to do in a perfect world, but not necessarily have the money to do. We know as Moorhead grows east, there will be a number of roadway connections that will become a priority, and we list those here. There are a number of new interchanges, either on Highway 336 there or on I-29 that city staff has looked at and said that in the future, at some time, it might make sense to do those. We know that there may be a number of conflicts, but we wanted to incorporate these projects in the language just to make sure they're carried forward so when we want to do them, they're in the plan. And those are just a little bit more closely here. Like I said, this project or this plan is multimodal. Here are a number of bike projects we looked at this area. I'll call out the Heartland Trail Corridor, which is the big blue line that extends off to the east there. Currently, our staff is working with multi-jurisdictional effort to look at where that trail could possibly go. In fact, I believe there is just some elected state representatives that were doing a tour for maybe inclusion of this trail in the bonding package that's going forward. So we'll see if that gets implemented. So we're carrying that project forward within our plan. Here are the highest priority projects, bicycle and pedestrian projects in Moorhead. And those are just the funding tables for that. Kind of our second priority of projects. And then the tertiary priority. And then we also have a vision plan for bike and ped too. And a lot of this vision plan represents as neighborhoods come online, extending bicycle and pedestrian facilities into those neighborhoods, especially in the southwest area of our region. So last slide, I know it's been a little long, but we have a number of recommendations that have come out of our plan of things that we need to study in this 5-year period to kind of really hone in on some of those solutions that we've listed earlier in the plan, and this here is a listing of those. So with that, any questions from members?
Thank you. Any questions regarding the report? Councilmember Watson Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give information for anyone who wanted to look at the report more in depth. I know it's posted online at this point.
Yeah,
that
correct. The report is posted on our website and our Facebook page. And I believe we've shared a video of a presentation that was given at a brown bag in Fargo with all the jurisdictions were invited to. I believe we have that video posted on our webpage. And I think we've shared it with all of the jurisdictions too, so it might be on your Facebook pages as well. So if you just want to check out the draft plan, it's not in its final form right now. We're just working out a couple glitches that we've found, and hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have that final version wrapped up. We are looking, as you can see in your packet, to have all of our jurisdictions sign a resolution of support saying that, we really support the elements of this planning effort, and that, we've brought you and we've worked with you throughout this process, and we're not just coming up with this off the top of our heads.
Councilmember Dahlquist?
Thank you, Mayor. When did you say you were going to be working on that intersections, the 75 and Highway 10? Because I've actually had people say something's got to be done, because that's a very dangerous intersection.
Sure. We're actually doing the corridor study now. We're in kind of the final months of the corridor study. Right now, our consultant, SRF Consulting Group, is working through some of alternatives for the US 10 corridor between 8th and the river, just to look at some alternative designs. But we've also incorporated a number of pedestrian crossings, especially along that 8th corridor, knowing that, like, that McDonald's is there and people are kind of going back and forth in that area. One of the major concerns in that area, too, was how the roadway shifted. And so the corridor study actually recommends taking out that shift and proposes an alignment that would take out that shift, which we hope that would make people a little bit more aware, because it's very odd and we, the funny thing is we could not track down why that was originally done. It just happens to be part of that roadway, and so I think straightening that out a bit will definitely help.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that because I know that there have been some major concerns with pedestrians in that area. We have a lot of student traffic, obviously, and I know that there was a resident that had a near miss with a vehicle. I'm sure that happens quite a bit, but that intersection has been an issue.
Yeah, there are a number of elements of this plan. I won't speak to it off the top of my head, but we can definitely share some of the preliminary outcomes of that plan, and we will also come back in front of this body once that study gets in a form where we can share it with you and have you digest that.
That would be good, because obviously we have a lot of, again, student traffic, and just for those folks at home, I'm referencing 4th Avenue and 8th Street. And so I know with more development taking place on 8th Street, the traffic's only going to get more, well, I guess there'll be more traffic, I guess.
I know that was a particular intersection that we looked at, and we also looked at maybe the possibility of closing some of those throughs so you can put like a pedestrian island there so people could, cross a little bit more safely. So there are a number of alternatives that we include in the plan. We don't just settle on one, we look at a whole host of ideas, so.
That's good.
Yep.
Does that bring about any questions for anyone? Comments? Okay. Well, thank you.
Yep, thank you very much.
Thank you for presenting tonight. If there's not any more discussion, then there is a resolution 10A to accept, a proposed resolution, rather, to accept the Metro Growth 2045 Fargo Moorhead Area Long Range Transportation Plan. Is there a motion to approve?
I'd move approval.
Motion made by Councilmember Watson Curry. Second. Seconded by Councilmember Dahlquist. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. So we'll go back to, for those at home, number 9 for our public hearing, which is a public hearing to consider the 2019 Enterprise Zone Program. Is there a motion to move us into public hearing? Motion made by Councilmember Carlson, seconded by Councilmember Duran. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are now in public hearing, and this will be presented by,
Mr. Mayor, as Acting Economic Development Director, I'd like to introduce this topic, and then Amy will fill in the blanks. Okay. So what you have before you, we're having the public hearing, which is a requirement of the Border City legislation. And what this is this is a board, just as a reminder, the Border City program is there as a statute by the state of Minnesota to help 5 cities along the northwestern Minnesota border of North Dakota. It offers the funding for local programs, whatever local program will fit best in your community to help offset some of the disparities between our border cities. And in our case, it would be Fargo and West Fargo across the river. So with that, in Moorhead, we have these programs and we review them annually by the EDA and the City Council, hence why we're here today. This is one of the programs, or this is the program last year that became the more permanent funding, if you recall, which nets us about $520 million, or no, 520,000, excuse me, goodness. I was just thinking diversion, sorry, $520,000 annually, and it's been written in the legislation, so we don't have to keep asking for it. It's ongoing every year. One of the programs is a workers' comp program that we offer local businesses, and we do have some, there are some parameters surrounding that. You've already approved that, so we're doing the report today on the applications and new members of that program. I want to remind the council, I've mentioned this twice in the last year, that we are looking at that program to see if it really is the best program for our community. We've had it for a while. While some businesses do get benefit from it, not all the businesses get benefit, and it's not of the maximum benefit that might be options for us to consider. So we are talking about getting local businesses together to talk about what other programs they would like to see, what would benefit them that they don't have over here versus Fargo and West Fargo. But with that, I'm gonna let Amy give the report. So Amy Thorpe is here. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for that introduction, Ms. Volkers. It was perfect. So the Workers' Compensation Tax Credit Program was created to support our local businesses by reducing the expense of workers' compensation insurance. And the reason that we target workers' compensation insurance is because in North Dakota, they have a statewide program that insures all the businesses in North Dakota, whereas in Minnesota, businesses must obtain this through their local insurance providers and have a private insurance policy. For some industries, with low injury risk, this isn't a real big deal. But for many industries with higher risk, such as carpenters, electricians, manufacturing, sugar refining, which we know is a big industry in Moorhead, the disparity is significant. With that being said, though, Moorhead has always welcomed all businesses to apply, no matter what industry that they are in. By the numbers, this year so far we've received 103 applications. In 2018 we processed 130. I do expect that we will get a significant number of applications after the first of the year when accountants and tax preparers have told their businesses that they need this form. So we do get quite a number of phone calls in January. Can I still apply? And the answer is yes. We accept all applications until the time that we are filing our annual report. Of those 103 businesses, we're giving out $271,000 in credits. But last year we gave out $331,000. So I do expect a significant amount to come in January. That will leave us, as I said in June when we got approval for the program, about $1 million left in that enterprise zone fund. It's nice to have a little bit of a balance, but we can certainly look at other opportunities as well. So that's really all I have for you tonight. We're requesting a resolution to approve the list of new businesses and changes to the business names. That's included as an exhibit. Confirm the credit levels that you've already approved in June. That's just reiterated on the resolution. accept the applications to date and those to be submitted through the first of the year, and then to direct the mayor and city manager to sign any agreements necessary to complete the program requirements. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Ms. Thorpe? Councilmember Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam City Manager, you'd commented that we're looking at other potential projects or programs that could reduce the disparity between Moorhead and Fargo. And we all know by door knocking and talking with constituents, restaurants is always a big question. Why can't we get restaurants here like Fargo can? And we know that it has to do with tip wage. There's, big difference between Minnesota and North Dakota when it comes to that. Have we looked into that as being a potential project or program that we can try and tackle, or is that way outside of what we can do?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Duran, that is exactly what we're looking at, something like that and the income tax disparity between us on this side of the river and Fargo and North Dakota. But the tip credit is one of the things that we want to talk to our local businesses about to see if they would, that's not going to affect all the businesses, right? Where workers' comp is a little more widespread, but it might be something that we could split up the funding for to be considered, but that's why we want to have the local groups. Amy, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I do think that some study should be done to see how many businesses that would affect and what the potential cost to benefit would be.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Good idea.
Does that bring about any comments or questions? Okay. Ms. Thorpe, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
Motion made to close the public hearing made by Councilmember Carlson, seconded by Councilmember Duran. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are out of public hearing. Is there a motion to approve the resolution regarding the 2019 Enterprise Zone Program?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Duran, seconded by Councilmember Carlson. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. That brings us to item number 13 for those at home, the 2019-2020 Snow and Ice Control Plan presentation by Mr. Steve Moore.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I thought it'd be an opportune time to run over our upcoming snow and ice control plan for this year. And so, at risk of another death by PowerPoint presentation, here we go. This is what I'm going to talk about today. So I won't go through each one of those. I have a section for each one. So what do we do every year? Our AOR, our area of responsibility for the city of Moorhead, is over 500 lane miles. You've heard that term before, 500 lane miles. That's what we have to cover. In addition to that, we have 46.3 miles of pedestrian paths, bike paths, and public sidewalks. So that's part of it. And then the graphs there are from Bob's slides that just kind of shows the functional class and surface type of our roads. Just kind of gee whiz information on what we're covering with our snow removal. We're into preseason, almost finishing up our preseason preparation. We did have an event here back in early October, but I'm not counting that one. So that wasn't fair. That was just like last year. So really our time zone to get prepared is October, because we're wrapping up our street repair program and going into fall sweeping and leaf pickup and those kinds of things. And so now we're making our transition and preparing for snow. So preseason snow prep, I'm updating the snow and ice control plan. We've had a lot of changes over the last few years, so I want to upgrade the plan and update it to make sure it reflects all our recent, all our techniques and processes that we use. We're inspecting, preparing, and calibrating equipment. We finished that, and procuring ice control materials, updating our route maps, and doing some training here at the end of this week. I'll go into a little more detail. So our snow and ice plan, That's really outlines our snow and ice control procedures, our training, our resource allocations, and really how we're going to operate and operate safely during the snow season. So this document has it all together. And this briefing really is it'll highlight some of that snow and ice control plan that's currently under revision. We're done inspecting and preparing our equipment. These slides are some, just our assets. So we have snow plows, straight snow plows. We have 3 of those primary ones. And then we have 3 spares. As you can imagine, when we progress through snow and ice control season, we have to have some spare equipment as we have breakdowns and needed repairs during the operations. And then our 4 newest in the fleet are those orange ones that you see there. Those are snow plows with both salt, sand, and liquid brine tanks on them. So they're an all-in-one asset, and we're shifting over the years. Every time we replace a snow plow, we're going to replace it with a multi-use asset such as that. That's really our Cadillac of the fleet right now. We have 3 motor graders, and we have 3 primary payloaders with blades on it. And I need to change that because we used to be able to do all our cul-de-sacs with 3 payloaders. Now we need 4. So Unit 458 is a primary asset for cul-de-sacs. And that's our primary. Payloaders are what we push snow in our cul-de-sacs with. We have 2 of our older models that are just straight salt and sand. We used to do all salting and sanding with just assets that didn't have any plow capabilities on it. Now, we used to have 3. Now, with the 4 plows we have and the 2 traditional salt sanders, we have 6 of those assets. So we've doubled our assets in the last few years for salt and sand. Snow blowers, these are the big dogs you saw probably a lot last year as we attempted to widen our streets through the massive amount of snow in a very short period of time. We're replacing one of those this year, replacing one next year because they got a lot of hours on them, and we had to do a lot of work to keep them running last year, so we need to recapitalize those assets. Anti-icing, we brought this capability on a few years ago. That's our 3,000-gallon truck we brought on last year, which we do for pre-treatment anti-icing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that during the concept of operations portion of the briefing. And we also have a 500-gallon asset. That's what we cobbled together a few years ago to start the process and really try anti-icing out, and it was very successful.
Councilmember Watson Curry has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, this is kind of a nerdy question, but the numbers which you've given your assets, is there rhyme or reason, or can we identify what year they are based on it? I know for map bus, the buses, you can identify what year and what city primarily uses
Yeah,
them.
you don't. 200 are all street and alley assets, 200 series.
Okay.
And so we don't put a dash 19 behind it or anything like that for the year.
Okay, thank you.
We're calibrating our equipment. We spent a lot of time on this last year, and the payoff of that was we actually used 350 fewer tons of salt last year than we did the previous year, and we had much more snow and ice. And this was, I got to give my guys, my crew chief, Blake Hoganson and Dave DeLong and Randy Affield, my operations manager, really taking the lead on getting this equipment calibrated. And so you translate, it's $100 a ton for salt. So you can do, the math's pretty easy, and when you save 350 tons, it's about $35,000 in savings. Of course, we burned through that in maintenance and repair last year, so we didn't really have a surplus. I just wanted to highlight that. There's no cash available. Speaking of ice control materials, we need about my comfort level is about 1,000 tons prior to the season. Why do we have to have so much? Well, because once you're into the season, you can't get it. It's hard to get because we're a small player in this, and with MnDOT and North Dakota. So,
Councilmember Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we have a really dry winter and we don't need much, does that last? Well, can we keep that for the next year? Or
yes, with proper storage, because we store all of our salt down with MnDOT and Clay County down at the South Public Works facility.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, good question. So items of note is last year it was $94 a ton for salt. We're buying all ours now at $115 a ton because in 1 January it's going up to $135 a ton. Why? It's market, right? Supply and demand. So we got 500 purchased, we're working on the other 500, and we have 200 left over from last year. So,
Councilmember White.
yes.
Steve, I know how good you are about being fiscally cautious with these things, and we looked at, for things like our fuel, or our fuel, of purchasing, working collaboratively and purchasing, doing some different changes with our purchasing so that we could save some money. Have we looked at any of that with salt, of maybe like going in and getting?
Yes, we tried to tack on with MnDOT.
Okay.
But right now, their rate is higher than ours.
Okay.
So, we have looked at it, yes, but we
Okay.
haven't found anything that's going to offer any bulk savings, because again, we're such a small purchaser. We're not going to plus up anything for the bigger players to make advantage of including us in their purchasing. But we'll continue to work with MnDOT.
Thanks.
We're updating route maps, so actually they were updated today. So on the bottom part of your packet, these are kind of eye charts, but they're just to really give you an indication of the kind of maps that we have that lay out our concept of operations. So they're all updated. We had a meeting on the 22nd. We meet with my folks in Public Works. We meet with engineering, GIS folks, and MapBus, and we talk about route changes in MapBus, how we support them, because most MapBus routes are at least a secondary route, so we get to those quicker. So we had that meeting, got all the inputs, new roads, new streets, new construction, and those are all rolled in and updated on our maps, and those are were finished today, as a matter of fact. So the copies you have are the latest copies. And we make that zone map we break those down and laminate those, and those are placed in trucks just in case somebody gets in that doesn't normally run the route, has a route map. Each of the vehicles have route maps, detailed route maps. Training and dry runs, we've done two new trainings this year. The first was Minnesota Pollution Control Agency Smart Salt Level 1 training. So almost all of my guys are Salt 1 level. What does that mean? We're trying to come up with a way where we use the right amount of salt for the right situation to minimize impact to the environment. The bottom line is our number one priority is safety of the roadways. And sometimes that is in conflict with safety and security of the environment. However, this program tries to bring those two things closer together, because more salt doesn't mean safer roads. The right amount of salt in the right situation is the safest. So that's what we're pushing for. And last week, Ben Dow, the Fargo Public Works Director, invited us over. We had 166 people from around the state of Minnesota and the state of North Dakota. All day, we spent learning about winter maintenance. And so there was some good information presented and some good dialogue between cities. What do you guys do? What's your biggest issues? And the funny thing is, they're all the same. Doesn't matter where you live, the complaints are all the same. So, and then we're doing in-house training this Friday, rodeo, and over at Centennial North Ball Field. So if you're available in the morning on Friday and you want to come and ride in a snowplow, you can come out there and ride in a snowplow. And we got some obstacle courses set up, and we're going to do some training with our folks. And then the following week, we're going to be doing our dry runs, where we actually go out into the zones and drive around and go over the routes. The good news is, this is the first year in the 5 years I've been here that I have all my returning employees. I don't have a new truck driver this year that we have to start over with, so I'm very happy about that. So that's looking forward to that. And then once we do our dry runs, we're going to go back and identify any vehicle issues or equipment issues and get those fixed, and adjust any routes if we need to, based on if we missed anything in our map update. Concept of operations, ConOps. This is how we're going to do business. Staff resources in the street department, we have, that's a list of who we have. I have 2 crew chief operators. That's new. Last year, we only had 1 crew chief operator. I upgraded a heavy equipment operator position to a second crew chief position. So that allows me to have a better span of control. during operations, and then puts an experienced person available for different shifts if we need to do that. And then ultimately, one of them has to go on vacation, at some point in time. So it ensures that I have the leadership in place to direct operations. And 5 heavy equipment operators, 5 truck drivers, and then 2 truck drivers who are chopped from the golf course. So those 2 golf course technicians come to the streets and plow snow. So we have, at 100%, we have 14 drivers available for our equipment at any given time. Snow and ice events, we have 4 phases. First is the anti-ice phase. Phase 1 is primary and secondary emergency routes. Phase 2 is citywide plowing, and then the steady state routine maintenance is phase 3, and I'll talk a little bit about each of those. Anti-ice phase, the objective of that is to prevent snow from freezing and bonding to the pavement surface. Okay, so it's kind of like spraying your pan with PAM. So your eggs don't stick. So we want to try to make it so the snow don't stick. So your first map in your packet here are the ice control routes, and those are designated into 3 zones in there. That's what we'll spray. And what we use is a brine solution, and then if temperatures drop, we add a little more carbohydrate, which lowers the freezing point of that brine solution, so you can operate at lower temperatures. It used to be beet juice, but it's not beet juice. It's called AMP. It's another carbohydrate. So we get ours from Fargo. They have a brine producing plant, and we buy ours from them, and they've been a great partner in this. So this is just a cool photo of the 34th Street overpass over I-94. The left lane was treated, and the truck is now treating the right lane. In that particular instance, we got out a little bit too late because ultimately you want to have the anti-ice done before any precip falls. But we were just finishing up when the precip started to fall. But this was a great picture to show the difference between if you pre-treat and if you don't. So it provides a safer driving surface as that precipitation starts. This, I won't go into detail. That is a decision matrix that we go through when we're going to spray for anti-ice. Has to be the right temperature, has to be the right wind speed, has to be the right moisture content. There's some science involved in determining whether you anti-ice or not. I like to call it where science meets art, because there is an art to this, where you just kind of have to make some choices with all the data that you have, and hopefully you make the right choices. But bottom line, if it's raining or blowing snow, we're not anti-icing. So what does that mean around here? There's always a lot of wind. So typically anti-ice is very effective early in the season, in December, and late in the season. So as the temperatures are higher. January and February, you won't see too much anti-icing going on because it'll all freeze over. On to phase 1, primary and secondary. We start running those routes when precipitation starts, and we're going to start to see accumulation 1 to 2 inches. Why do we focus on those routes? Because that's where all the traffic is. Okay, some people may get frustrated if their street hasn't been plowed, but we gotta make the busiest streets safest, and sometimes there's sustained operations during a prolonged event where we're gonna have to make several passes on primary and secondary routes before we hit the residential areas. It's statistics, and it's the streets that are being used at higher speeds. Snow is moved from the center of the street to the curb and placed as equitably as possible on the boulevards. Okay, take that for what it's worth. It's very difficult to do, and it's a very, when it's 2 a.m. and it's blowing 40 miles an hour and you're pushing snow, it's really hard to distribute it evenly along the boulevard, so just keep that in mind. As well, while we're plowing, salt trucks will be out. Salt is the primary choice of ice control here now. It used to be sand. That's all you saw was sand. Because I get calls now, where's the sand? Where's the sand? Well, we're not doing sand unless we need to use sand. That's the last choice, because once you put sand on a high speed, if I put a sand on primary, this is what we learned last week. 13 cars is all it takes to push it off the road surface off to the side, where it's no longer doing any good. 13 to 18 cars. That's why sand will be reserved for low-speed areas and intersections at low temps. But as long as I have a pavement temperature 15 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm using salt, because that's the effective melting to low, and it's all pavement temperature. So that's the key, remember that. So if an ambient air temperature is 2 degrees, but my pavement temperature is 15, you'll see me putting salt down, okay? So it's pavement temperature, not ambient air temperature. That's the key. And this is what I mentioned with sand in low-speed areas and intersections at colder temperatures. We have some treated salt that we'll use on the bridges, particularly the 34th Street overpass over the railroad, because that is steep. So it's basically treated with some magnesium and some carbohydrate, so it gives a lower melting temperature. And it's got a persistent. It'll stay on longer. The mag will burn off pretty fast, but the carbohydrate lets it stay there longer to leave the brine there longer. Ice control, I talked about the chemicals. It's to break the bond between pavement. It's not to melt. Everybody thinks it's to melt. It's to break the bond so I can get the plows through to pick it off the pavement. It does look like it's melting, so yes, I get that, but it's to get that snow off. Our primary is sodium chloride. We do, like I talked about, the mag chloride and carbohydrate, and then the liquid brine we use to pre-treat our salt and to do anti-icing. Abrasives, sand provides traction only. Sand doesn't melt. Remember this. You'll hear this. Sand does not melt. It's physically impossible. Then we're going to use it at low intersections and low speed areas. Now, interesting, we do use a mix of sand, 25, 50, or 75%, but the training we went to last week says that's not the smartest way to use salt, because you have to do more passes to apply, and you ultimately end up applying the same amount over a different period of time, but you're burning more fuel and more equipment time to do the same thing. So we constantly look at our processes for applying ice control. Pavement temperature, again, is the key. That picture is what Randy has on his pickup truck, and he drives around and takes pavement temperatures. It's kind of his bag. So that's, but he's the one that says the pavement temperature is this, and then we start working our plan when we're planning a snow event and ice control. Liquid brine tanks and applicators, that's a picture on the right of one of our new units. And basically, those are filled with salt with brine, and then what happens is you spray the salt as it comes out the back end of the truck. Why do you do that? Because you've seen the salt bounce all over, right? Salt has to be in solution to work. So it has to come in contact with water. So what we're doing is starting that process as it comes out the back of the truck. And it'll stick to the road, and essentially, where you would reduce scatter from 30% to 4%. So 30% of your product goes off the road surface if you don't pre-wet, and if you pre-wet, only about 4% goes off. So more efficient use of salt. We put those online, and that's part of a whole calibration process the last couple of years. And it does, since it kick-starts it, it is effective at a little lower temperatures because it's already cooking when it hits the road surface. Phase 2, citywide plowing. When does phase 2 start? After the snow event ends. Remember that too. So if we get 24 hours of snow, you're not going to see a plow down your street until 24 hours after it starts. It's when it ends. Because we'll be running primaries and secondary routes during this time and keeping those main roads open and applying salt and ice control measures. Typically, when the snow stops, we try to line it up between a start time of midnight and 4 a.m. Midnight's the sweet spot, because then I can get 6.5 hours of plowing in before rush hour starts. But I can't get the entire city done before everybody goes to work. It's impossible. Where do we plow? We have 10 zones. That's another sheet, your second sheet there. Shows how we're broken up into snow removal zones. After we do the primaries, the crews break off, and they have their pre-assigned zones, so they start hitting their zones. And also, in addition to the plowing, the third sheet is the cul-de-sac removal area. So at the same time I have plows going and plowing streets, I have 4 payloaders broken into 4 zones starting to work the cul-de-sacs, because we have about 240 cul-de-sacs, and those take a lot of time.
I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. 240 cul-de-sacs?
Yes, cul-de-sacs and bulbs is what I call them. They're half cul-de-sacs, which are even worse than cul-de-sacs. because you have no place to push the snow in the center, because there's no center. The center is the street. So if I ever find out who came up with the bulb design, yeah, I don't know. I'm not his biggest fan or her fan. Our objective is to complete an initial pass on both sides of the streets within 24 hours after the end of the event, and provide clear driving lanes as quickly as possible. But remember, the first pass, the snow will not be pushed all the way back to your curb. That's for the daily maintenance route, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The last 2 years, our plowing has extended to about 10 to 14 hours, depending on the amount of snowfall. We had a couple 10-inch events that pushed 16 hours. Why is that important? Is because I can't run sustained 24/7 operations. So when we have an event, timing is everything. And once we start pushing, we're not going to stop unless I call no joy because there's a safety concern. Almost did it last year. 16 hours really pushed it. We don't use a lot of ice control in residential areas because it's not cost effective. We can't afford it. Plus, there's not enough traffic to make it work anyway. Cul-de-sac ice, we don't salt cul-de-sacs at all. However, under extreme circumstances, we will apply some sand there. And we had that a couple years ago when we had some bad ice storms and we had sanitation trucks slipping all over and buses and everything. So, and we will not clean private driveways or sidewalks. Remember that one.
Councilmember Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Moore, I know that last year when we had our epic winter, I had a lot of people contact me about that the plows would come after they would snowplow their driveway, wondering the reason why we're not able to get the snowplows with the arms that
Oh, the
lift up
gates.
and everything.
Well,
and I don't remember what it was, but if you could explain the reason why.
I knew this question was coming, so as I skip over my briefing to go to my backup slides, I'd like to talk about, there's cul-de-sacs, we can talk about that. I had that loaded up too.
I remember there was a reason, but I couldn't remember.
And
what it
interestingly
was.
enough, we talked to, the city of Bismarck was at this meeting, or this training, and we talked to them because they run gates. And here we go. Okay, so I don't know when they implemented it, but basically they said, at all possible, do not do this. Why? Because to do this, they required 8 additional full-time manpower positions. So they had to go from 20 manpower positions to 28 manpower positions. So 8 manpower positions, or, so let's say theoretically I needed 5 or 6. That is $350,000 a year, $400,000 a year in my operating budget to pay salaries and benefits. So at $150,000 per 1% tax levy, that's 3.5% tax levy right off the bat. Okay. They run 2 12-hour shifts at 14 personnel. I cannot run 24-hour shifts. Gates are ineffective in snowfalls greater than 4 inches. Why? It's physics. The snow has to go somewhere. So essentially what they do is they have to run on each residential street, they have to run a payloader and then a motor grader with a gate. 2 assets where you normally would only run 1. And then they make 3 to 4 passes on each side. So it takes them 36 hours running 2 shifts to completely plow the city of Bismarck. And again, it's, yes, there's my bullet points. So
Councilmember
any
Graham.
questions on that?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Moore, and that was for a snowstorm less than 4 inches? Or snow event less than 4 inches?
No, they do it for every event because, once you start, you're done. That's the expectation. And it's really costly. They just, in nothing. So now the level of service standard is any ridge at all in your driveway is unacceptable. So they get calls all the time now. And they also clear out driveways if it's not acceptable level of service. So Can you do it? Sure. Is it affordable, and does it make sense? No, I will not ever be in favor of gates in the city of Moorhead.
And again, I mean, I think for folks at home and for us too, it's good to ask these questions because we're going to get these questions. So the more education that we can do, the better off we will be able to build relationships and communication within our residents. So,
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
So I'm glad you're doing the research.
Yep. And City of Fargo is doing a study on gates for their city. And once Ben Dow has that, he's promised to give me a copy as well, so.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Steve, I think you had one point, maybe last year, the year before, you also explained that the driveways being so close together poses a problem as well. I mean, it works like when you're out in the country or maybe a very rural, more so area, because
It is, because we have roughly 12,000 driveways in the city of Moorhead, so, just the time, and then once that blade fills up, if you don't open the gate, it's going to start coming out and leaving a row in the center, which you have to come back and make another pass at. And then again, that has to go somewhere. So this cul-de-sac example is a perfect example of even if you had a gate, you have 17 driveways on a cul-de-sac.
and about 2 to 4 feet between each driveway.
It is,
maybe.
there's 90 feet available out of 402 feet of curb for snow storage. It's not gonna work.
It looked nice when you see, when you see a truck running on a road and how it just easily lifts up and drops down. But yeah, when you have situations where you have driveways that are just feet apart, it clearly doesn't work.
Yeah, and there might be some utility down in the downtown areas and things like that but again, this really slows down operations.
Thank you for adding that to your presentation, because I would agree with what Mayor Judd said, that it's good for people to understand and know that at least we're looking into these things.
And I don't want to come across as, I'm vehemently opposed to gates. Yes, that's a fact, but I'm also a resident. I also get snow and I don't get special treatment. Well, my wife does the snow blowing, so I get the phone call when Juan comes by after she's already done the driveway. But it's not fun for us. We don't like to do it. It's just when you have a lot of snow, you're gonna get it in your driveway.
Can we get a copy of, not only we have our own copy of the presentation, but with the extra slides? Or the
Yes,
extra.
yes.
And the reason being, when we have our coffees with the mayor or any type of public engagement, we can have this ready for us to answer any questions, because they may come up, and for those that might not be able to watch or be able to attend, if we can go reach out to them with this information, because I'm sure depending on the nature of our weather, we may have some frustrated folks, and just so we can educate.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
and I was going to say, in addition to the added manpower, there would be additional equipment
Yes.
expense that would be associated if we would ever be looking at that, because it's not just adding a gate on to what we currently have.
Yes. So if you remember, I have 5 payloaders and 4 are used for cul-de-sacs. So if I need 1 payloader and 1 motor grader to push every street, and I only have 3 motor graders, I'm going to have to procure, and motor graders are roughly $400,000 a piece. Payloaders are $260,000. Yes, it would be extremely expensive to implement.
Councilmember White.
The one thing I will say, because, I think you guys take a lot of heat for that, and there might be other creative solutions that we could work on that might help with that, because I do recognize that sometimes there's people that are elderly, that have mobility issues, and, maybe something like working with First Link and having a network, a volunteer program set up so that, say you have some folks that are elderly and need help, they could get registered, and then, we've got college students that are looking for volunteer hours and other things like that. Some of us that just would be willing to pitch in, that we could sign up to be a volunteer to go out and shovel out somebody's driveway when we get a storm. And, I think just something like that, it may not fix everything, but rather than having people just complain about it and be upset, and, we'd also would be able to help some of the folks that legitimately do need some help when we do have some of these issues come up.
Councilmember Duran.
Thank you. Is there an app or something online that people can watch and see where the trucks are and what estimated time they might be in a neighborhood?
We don't, our GPS system does not show real time
Okay.
on the internet. So there are more advanced systems that do that. MnDOT has one. You can actually see, they have cameras in the units, so you can actually see what a snowplow driver is seeing, and then they have real-time updates on the internet. But those, we don't have that capability.
What would that kind of capability cost?
I would have to, I haven't researched that. I could go look at some vendors and see what that cost would be. There would be benefits. We use it all the time, so when we have it on the big screen, and when people call, we can see where those units are. They give us their address, but yeah, it would obviously be something. There's a lot of cities that use that type of system.
It might be something worth checking out. Thank you.
Councilmember Dahlquist.
Thank you, Mayor. I have had people ask why we don't have volunteers like we have for the police department, for the street department. And I'm sure what they're thinking is they could drive these vehicles. But with your idea about, how cool it would be, because I'm looking forward to Friday to come and to be in those vehicles. But that question has been asked, so when you're talking about people that cannot clear their driveways, and people that do want to volunteer, that's maybe a possibility. Not, you wouldn't have to worry about it.
No.
I'm talking about,
Oh, on there, yeah. Yeah.
But people
just
do
to answer
wanna-
your question, it requires a Class B CDL, commercial driver's license, and so forth. But yeah, my heart stopped just for a second there.
So if we come Friday, we don't get to drive the truck then?
Oh, you
No,
can,
just kidding.
no, you get to try it out, but you can't plow snow. So, just a few more slides here. Industry best practice is we always plow in the direction of traffic. So we get a lot of questions too. Well, there's no houses on this side, so can't you come down the other side and push it all the way across the street and away from my driveway? In theory, yes, we can, but we have, again, 500 lane miles I need to plow, and it already takes 10 to 14 hours. Making multiple passes in the same direction is just not an efficient way to plow when you're working a grid system and plowing. So if you're working a grid, then right turns maximizes that where we have person working avenues and person working the streets and then making all right turns. It's just much more efficient, and it's an industry best practice. We talked about that last week as well, so I wanted to highlight that. Parks maintenance, this is also something you may get inquiries on. Like I said, we have 46 miles of bike paths. My staffing is 6 full-time FTEs and 1 to 2 seasonal FTEs. Right now I'm down to 5 because one of my guys is a guardsman and he's on active duty until February. So we're down to 5 for the winter. Typically we'll do it after snowfall ends. It'll be after the snowfall ends. And typically we do it the next regularly scheduled day at 7 a.m. when the shift starts. So I pay a lot of overtime for street plowing, but my overtime budget in parks maintenance is not very big, so I don't use a lot of it to plow snow on bike paths. And sidewalks will do for safety reasons, but the bike paths and things like that can wait, they typically wait. But we still have an objective to clear all the areas within 24 hours at the end of the snow event. And we've been doing a pretty good job with that. It may take longer, though. If we get heavy snow and we have to use the blowers, it takes a long time if I can't get a pickup plow through or a tool cat with a plow and a broom or a blower. So it could take as long as anywhere from 48 to 72 hours to clear all the bike paths.
Councilmember Watson Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, question on should the pedestrian bridges ever come down for winter? I just wanted clarification on responsibility for clearing those. If they're left up over the winter, I guess that would ease something.
Yeah, if they're
But
down, we'll take care of the Davy, and Fargo will take care of the Gooseberry.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And last priorities are the outdoor skating rinks and cross-country ski trails. So if I have assets left, then we start on those. If I have a seasonal employee, then I can get started on the ice rinks earlier, but the priority remains streets, sidewalks, bike paths, and then skating rinks. Daily maintenance, everybody's got a sign on their street that says when they're no parking area, that's when we do daily maintenance. That's when, and you have I didn't put that in your map packet though, but we do those on the day of your maintenance day, and that's when we push back the snow closer to the curb. Unless we have events like last February where we never had time to do daily maintenance, and that's why the street started to shrink. And then there was just so much snow, it couldn't be physically moved and pushed out anyway. The areas, and then during phase 3, in addition to those maintenance routes, we drive the city and make sure we're taking care of drift areas that are susceptible to drifting and monitor those and plow those. Continued salt and sand operations throughout primary, secondary routes to maintain safety, and establishing windrows in the areas that are prone to drifting, and that helps minimize that drifting across the roadway. 15th Avenue North is a classic example of that. And there's some areas down south as well. And then if we get a lot of accumulation downtown, we got to start clearing them out downtown, and we do that with snow blowers and the back of dump trucks, and that is a night operation. So that time, if we have a lot of snow events, that won't be done until we have a chance to break off. Because I've run night ops to haul snow from downtown, and then we had a snow event the next day, and we had a huge delay in when we started responding to that event. Levels of service very quickly. Levels of service depend on the timing of the event, the amount of snow, and the pavement temperature. That's our goal. 24 hours after snowfall ends, that your street should be plowed. And we can't run full 24/7, so every event we have to plan and time it. That's why I'll send a sit rep out to kind of let everybody know a situation report on what we're going to run, and maintaining the safety in primary and secondary routes. And I do run, this is just a note, 2 personnel on night shift during normal operations if we're not pushing a snow event, so they can continue to push back drifting areas and apply salt and sand if necessary. So levels of service, primary route, our goal is significant amount of pavement showing. Now, if it's 32 below or 20 below, it ain't gonna happen, because I don't have enough, there's nothing that'll remove that snow. Secondary routes, some bare pavement, those wheel tracks you'll see. Residential streets, you may see some pavement, you might not. But it'll be a pack, as much snow will be removed as possible. And then alleys and gravel roads, it's minimal bare pavement, and you don't use salt on gravel roads. If you get asked that question, is ineffective on gravel. So the only thing you can put on gravel roads is sand. Sit reps, you'll see them, you've seen them, you'll continue to see them. There's a GPS printout of where we've been and a condition and the success rate and our plans ahead. You'll continue to get those through the city manager. And we're ready for the next season. So thanks for your time and allowing me to give you an update on where we are.
Councilmember Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought of 2 things. One I know is out of your realm, but maybe out of your position, but you might know. Mailboxes. How much room do mail trucks, if you have a mailbox, how far should people push the snow out of the way so mail trucks can get through? Do you know that off the top of your head?
So the Postal Service has actually, you can look up what you should do.
Yeah.
And what it should look like.
Yeah.
So it's hard to tell. Typically I snow blow down my curb line, to keep the plow from pushing any more snow on the mailbox.
That actually was my second comment or question. For people who don't want that snow in their driveway, is there something they can do to limit the amount of snow that ends up at the end of their driveway, when the snow?
Yes, yeah. So on a maintenance day, a lot of calls where we get frustrated customers is you'll have a snow event, we'll push it into your driveway.
Yep.
And then just like I do, I clean my driveway out, it's nice and good, and then here comes your maintenance day, it's Tuesday. And then we push it back to the curb, and there's another ridge in your driveway. So in order to avoid that second pass ridge, you should find your curb line, mark your curb line, get one of those dealios. Mark your curb line.
They're called Delios, so if I go to Menards,
I can't remember. It escapes me. The marker, and then run your snow blower all the way down. And there's some people who do it really, really well.
Yeah.
And it's pretty effective. So that helps minimize that second pass in your driveway.
Yeah. And then, like, for questions about the mailbox, you can just log on to the Postal Service and find that information.
Yes, they give you some recommendations on how
All right.
to clear it.
Perfect, thank you.
There is any questions or comments? Councilmember Watson Curry.
All this conversation about brine and salt kind of has me craving pickles. I feel like you guys should submit a pickle entry for the county fair. I just wanted to express our gratitude for the preparation for your staff, and I know they're ready, but I hope that we can wait a little before they put all this new knowledge to use. So that's all I wanted to relay.
I'd be good with that, too.
Any other questions or comments? Well, again, thank you for all your work, Mr. Moore. Folks at home who are listening, we're all in this together. We have a plan, and get to know your neighbor. If you need some help clearing your driveways and sidewalks, maybe in exchange you can swap out a hot dish or some cookies or something for some help. But we're all in this together, so really appreciate your work and your effort, and thank you for your report.
And thanks for your continued support. Thanks.
Steve?
We'll move to item number 15 on the agenda, Mayor and Council reports. Are there any reports? Any of our council members? Councilmember White.
I just wanted to thank Mayor Judd for allowing me to read the proclamation today for Florence Klingensmith Day. And if you haven't had a chance yet, I encourage everyone to stop by and see our new wonderful mural that we have in her honor. It's on the outside of Moorhead Ace Hardware, and we have to thank them for being willing to host that. And it was one of our 2 public arts projects that we funded this year. And this is Florence Klingensmith Day, and it's great to be able to recognize such a brave, courageous, spunky former resident of Moorhead.
Well, thank you for being able to be there as well, Councilmember White. I really appreciate you, and thank you for reading that. I think it was really important that we acknowledge her and this day, so thank you for that. Any other items? Okay. I'll just briefly state that, excuse me, 2 weeks ago, after the last meeting, I went down with a few folks to Washington, D.C. To lobby for the bill grant application for the 11th Street underpass. I think it was Dr. Bob Zimmerman, also another member from the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and Madam City Manager, you can help me. I forgot Mr. Curtis's from the...
Curtis from the Great Northern Railroad Coalition. Curtis Shack.
Thank you very much, Early. I just met Mr. Shack, and he was very much an asset to have in Washington to help, hopefully help us push this application through. It would really be a great benefit to our city because if we can get some federal funding from the build grant, it will really help the state help in that aspect of cutting down costs for the underpass, which is really important from a public safety and economic development standpoint. Also went back to Washington for flood diversion lobbying efforts as well. I think at this point, gratitude for our support from our North Dakota partners, as well as our Minnesota contingent regarding the WIFIA loan. And so that's one avenue for a source of funding. And also we're looking at other avenues as well to help fund the diversion project. So that was pretty much my couple of weeks. My spouse, I think, is happy that I'm home. Maybe, I'm not sure, but it has been a busy couple of weeks. Thank you, Councilmember Duran. Also, there will be a coffee with the mayor on November 4th at Moorhead Senior High School. And I believe, did we alter the times? I think it was, is it 6 to 8 p.m.? Usually it's 7 to 9, but I believe for this particular one, and of course my calendar is not popping up, 6:30 to 8:30. And I'll be on Monday, November the 4th at Moorhead Senior High School, and that's with our 2nd Ward Council members. Did I miss anything? Okay. Madam City Manager, for your report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 things. First, All Aboard Minnesota. Again, I want to encourage the public, 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday night at the Yum Comes. We're going to be talking about a potential second train going from Fargo, Moorhead to St. Paul, Minneapolis, on to Chicago and back during day hours, so people can travel it with greater ease. So we're talking about that. Second thing is the new council members who will be elected next Tuesday, November 5th, will be sworn in right before the meeting on November 12th, our next council meeting. 4:30 p.m., we will have the swearing in and a reception for them from 4:30 to 5:30, as a reminder. Third thing is, on the agendas, it was requested that we give a 2019 special session or election update, and we have a brand-new city clerk, Christina Rust, but this is not her first election. Actually, it's her 3rd election. So, but I've asked Christina to give, we're very glad, first of all, Christina, that is our new city clerk. Congratulations and welcome, Christina. Also, we'll have her give you the update, so you hear it directly from her mouth. Christina?
Thank you, City Manager. So yes, this is my 3rd election. I worked on the primaries and the generals with prior city clerks, so I've got a little bit of experience, but I've learned way more with this one. The upcoming special election has been a great opportunity for collaboration between the city, the county, and the school district. All 3 of those have sent out residents polling location cards so that we can clarify the ward's voting locations. As a reminder, the city is holding the special election for 2 vacant county seats, wards 3 and 4. For all residents in Ward 3 and 4, you will be voting on the open council seat and the school bond referendum. Residents in Ward 1 and 2 will be voting only on the school bond referendum. Thus far, absentee voting, we've had a really good response to it, I think largely due to those postcards and mailings that went out. So that was really nice to see, and just having that available and we're here for questions has been helpful to citizens. The election process has been moving along. We've got election judges trained. We have machine testing all done. We are getting ready for a public accuracy testing that will take place tomorrow, so Tuesday, October 29th at 4 p.m. at the 3rd floor conference room at City Hall. Election judges really are a critical part of a smooth running election. We currently have approximately 90 residents who have signed up to help out with the upcoming election. And we are so grateful for the residents who volunteer to be a part of this important process. And we are geared up and ready for the election as much as we can be right now. So come out and vote November 5th.
Cool. Thank you very much, and congratulations and welcome, Ms. Rust. Does that bring up any comments, or Councilmember Watson-Curry?
Just one quick comment. I know we talked a little bit about election judges in the past too, and I just think it's such an incredible resource. It is a paid, they are paid for their time, but I think I'd asked the question before too, if we do any sort of follow-up to collect any sort of information or input to tighten up our operations, it's a really important function. I know we don't have the county support in this too, so it's been a lot of new pieces, but I'm just curious if there's any sort of opportunity for input for our election judges on the tail end. I know we do the training, there's obviously the day of, and if we collect any sort of data to act on.
You know, I think that in the past, years prior, I think they have, and then it kind of went away. That is something that I guess I have really expressed to the city manager, and she has supported me on this 100%. Getting that feedback and also just showing our appreciation to those volunteers. And you're right, it is a paid position. I want to be clear on that. But, this year, and especially with the upcoming presidential election next year, it is on the top of my list to get some feedback, because what we don't want is we don't want to lose these volunteers. I mean, these are people who come back year after year, and they take the day off of work to help us, and we're so appreciative of it. So it is something that I will definitely, as working in this new role, that it will be a priority to get that feedback and then make sure that they are thanked for their efforts personally. So, you bet.
So, Brigham, any further questions or comments? Okay. Is that all, Madam City Manager, for your report? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, this moves us on to item number 17 on the agenda, excuse me, which is an executive session. And City Attorney, can I just read off A and B as one?
Yeah, what we'll do is we're going to have 2 executive sessions tonight, so we can do both of them in the same motion, but we should read off what each one is, the purpose is.
Not a problem, just want to make sure. So 17A is an executive closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05, subdivision 3B, paren 3, for the purpose of discussing the sale of real property described as Clay County parcel number 58.417.0290 and 58.417.0300 owned by the city of Moorhead. Furthermore, 17B is an executive session pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.05, subdivision 3B, for purposes of receiving an update from the External Litigation Counsel regarding the pending civil case Freedom Kirkala versus City of Moorhead et al., case number 14 CV 19-3419. Did I read that off properly? Okay. All right. Is there a motion to take us into executive session? We'll give it to Councilmember Durant, seconded by Councilmember Watson Curry. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are now in executive session.
So the first one.